Hello there, my friends, and welcome back to the Brightworks. What I have for you today is a high-level match at Beyond All Reason that was played on one of the silliest maps currently in the map pool. It goes by the name of Full Metal Plate, and it lives up well to that name. As you can see, the entire map is completely made of metal, so these commanders are going to be essentially scaling as rapidly as you can. Now, you might have noticed the other interesting thing about this. It's all water. So we've added a water level here, which means that every commander on this map today is going to be going for some tidal power. Now, there's some other cool reasons why I picked this match to cast, but let's meet our team leaders first. Spawning over on the red side of the map, commander that goes by the name of Autism. Autism, very interesting name. They're going to be going into a naval lab, no dur, but as a Cortex commander. Should be good stuff here in the, what is essentially the backline of the red team. I'll talk about that in just a second here after we meet our blue team leader. Spawning on the southern side of the blue team goes by the name of Lost Dead Man. One of the popular streamers here, wearing a little Viking helmet as well. Very, very cool to see. Going to be going into some of those Cortex boats as well. I love to see it. So, one of the interesting things that I noticed immediately off the bat here, the red team has gone for a very concentrated force, right? So they're in front of and behind each other to make sure that each and every one of them has a little bit of a teammate to play with, whereas the blue team has gone for a much more, say, a diverse spread across the map here. We're going to be going all the way up and down the entire way. It does mean that the blue team can essentially express a massive concave on the red team. The red team, however, will be protecting this area on the map, trying desperately to keep it all together. It should be interesting to see how that goes. Now, the other reason why I chose this game here, and let me see if I can find him in here. I don't see him. Never mind. Sometimes what I do is I filter by the top-rated players of the current map pool, or of the current ladder pool. I filter by the top-rated on the leaderboard, and apparently the name here. Hold on, I'm just pulling up my statistics here. The name of the player is. Sorry, I thought I had this up on the other tab right now. Professional casting, yours truly, Austin. Hello, Austin. Maybe that is the red team leader right here. I guess it would be. For some reason, the name is different now than what it was on the leaderboard, but that might just be a discontinuity there. So yeah, the red team leader, currently the #1 player on the team's leaderboard. Should be good fun to see what they have to show us today. So this is the interesting part about this map, obviously. The entire map is metal, so you don't have to worry about fighting over metal extractors. You can just build as many mexes as you want. Now, it's interesting that we're going Navy here, because playing with naval units, typically they demand a tremendous amount of metal, but when metal is no problem, it just means you get to pump out so many of those, yeah, juicy naval ships. Should be good fun to see. Already some gunboats headed across here. I like what Sand Panda's doing, though, building a couple of these submarines. I think that's a great idea. Typically those submarines so metal expensive, so metal dense, that it's really difficult to afford those. However, on a map where metal is of no issue, I think mass submarine is a really, really viable strategy. There's not really anything to effectively counter it other than mass destroyer or mass submarine itself. Essentially means that whoever goes mass submarine first is going to end up in a really nice position. Submarines moving across the top side here. We're essentially probing, we're reaching out in the darkness to try and find the enemy right now. Currently, Soli has ran into a couple of the forces here for Trilos as well as Dylan, both of which have managed to fend off the attacks from those light gunboats quite nicely. Wow, what a nice little organized, fortified setup we have. Oh, well, had planned set up over here. Apparently, not going to be the case for Jean-Germain. Our first battle. Our first real battle out on the high seas. Gunboats and missile ships versus gunboats and gunboats. And more gunboats. Did I mention the gunboats? There's quite a few of them. Yep, I think this will be nicely deflected right here by the blue team. Very, very good to see. More than enough gunboats to kill those gunboats. And eventually, the gunboats managed to win. Very good. Definitely some Cortex favoritism in this match. You can see that just about everybody has gone for those Cortex boats, which is a little interesting. I feel like Armada has some solid T2 ships, but I guess those Cortex T1 boats are really hard to pass up. Here's that submarine in the backline. More than happy to blow up those metal extractors. Obviously not as detrimental to blow up the metal extractors here because they can just be replaced with essentially an infinite amount of other metal extractors, but it is certainly nice, and those do have to be rebuilt at some point, right? And that time that it takes to rebuild those can be the main issue. You can see the Tan Commander crop rotation completely overflowing metal right now, trying desperately to spend it all, but really having an energy shortage more than anything. Probably the best strategy would just be to send more and more units to, or more and more constructors to go build tidal generators all over the place. I wonder what the tidal speed is on this map. Looks like it's 23, so that's actually really good. Should be no issue for these commanders to set up a whole bunch of tidal generators, sort of like what Commander Zod is doing here. Just tons and tons and tons of tidal generators coming up here, and eventually you're going to be in a really, really nice position. Commander Zod, one of the few commanders here that's actually spending their metal really appropriately. Well, I shouldn't say that. A lot of the red commanders have spent their metal quite well, as well as some of the blue commanders. Oftentimes, it can be tricky, though. In these mass metal maps, getting that metal spent is oftentimes one of the most difficult things, just because it's so out of cadence with what you're used to in a standard game. Typically, you want to spend that metal in somewhat of a reserve. You want to spend it on the right thing at the right time. On this one, it's just go, go, go. You just spend that metal until you're out of it, because you can always replace it. You can always replace that metal with just about 10 or so metal extractors pumping out even more. A couple of torpedo launchers have been set up in base right here for crop rotation. I think this is a good idea. I think Volshok, yeah, has sort of done the same thing here, and I think that's great because they represent the northern bulwark, right? They're holding the entire northern side of this together. As the blue team has discovered suddenly, there are no opposition over on the northern side. There's no enemy forces holding this together. Means it can be quite tricky because suddenly you know that your opponent's going for some sort of a cheeky play. Yeah, there we go. Go hug Ohu. I probably butchered that horrendously, but anyways, the powder blue commander has called it out perfectly. Full pack here, maybe. Obviously, easy for us to distinguish that, but you gotta remember that these commanders are working with the fog of war here, so they're trying to figure out what's going on without actually any idea of where their enemies are. Lone submarine sneaks past the defenses. It will find an opposed submarine here in orange colors. An opposition. An orca of the orange variety. It's blasted down. Mass submarine. I think it's a great idea. Looks like that's exactly the idea that Volshok is going for here. We have tons and tons of those depth-dwelling submarines, but I think even more of them should be coming up on the docket any second now. Ah, seaplanes have come up here. Okay, cheeky little build from the red commander going into some of those seaplanes, as well as a T2 naval lab here. T2 naval gantry, I almost called it. I believe it's called a lab. Oh, it's called a shipyard. There we go. Terminology. It's worth it. Especially for the viewers at home. I love these submarine battles. Definitely something satisfying about watching these submarines launch those torpedoes from so far away and still manage to nail whatever ships they can find and fire at. Very, very cool. And when's the last time you got to see a mass naval battle? Aside from maybe on stream, Tuesdays and Saturdays, 12 PDT. Humble plug. You're more than welcome to join in. Stream's open to anybody. Mass orca wave moving forward here. Yeah, we have the torpedo launcher over here, but it's just one of them. I think these orcas are going to fire away over here and bring down that laboratory. This is definitely terrible. Not a good situation right here for crop rotation. We do have the torpedo gunships up in the air, going to start launching some of those torpedoes down, and this torpedo launcher in the seas is actually doing a great amount of work. You know what? Damage actually mitigated a whole lot better than I imagined it would be. Yeah, you know what? Crop rotation definitely in a recoverable position here. I imagine those submarines would do quite a bit more damage, but not the case here. Two different players going into torpedo gunships. We also have the hovercraft platform. Now, the hovercraft platform is actually important because those hovercraft can bypass torpedoes, and oftentimes the easiest way to stall one of these matches or to fortify an area in one of these matches is to go for a bunch of those advanced torpedo launchers. Those C2 torpedo launchers can be extremely, extremely powerful. Makes for a very sturdy defense. But if you have units that can just float on by without managing to trigger those defenses, certainly well worth it. Crop rotation decides to go T2 on the front. I think it's a great idea. With the mass metal extractor available, I think it makes perfect sense to go up to T2 just about as quickly as you can. I think the green team is wishing they had a whole lot more air power up in the skies. We do have airplanes coming up on the northern side up here. Powder blue commander gonna start making some of those seaplanes. But there are now multiple commanders up in the air right now. Although I think it's only 2 commanders producing airships, but still. Definitely gonna be well worth it. Especially without those T2 anti-air ships out on the front lines. We do have mass production right here as well, by the way. We're just going... What is this queue? We've got herrings, we've got supporters. It looks like I did see a destroyer. Yeah, we got some frigates and stuff as well. The purple commander just going for mass units. That's an effective strategy. More stuff definitely beats less stuff. Seaplane gunships outmaneuvering the poor, unfortunate seaplane fighters here, desperately trying to shoot down those gunships. But here comes the airwave. Tons and tons of torpedo gunships headed across right now. We do have some T2 anti-air ships coming up right now, and those will be enough to shoot these down, but it will take a while. Yeah, those gunships, they're pretty sturdy. Will they be enough damage, or will they be able to do enough damage in the backline in order to make this well worth it? You kind of want to stutter step them a little bit, make them fire and then keep moving and fire and keep moving. You see, it's what the Red Commander was trying to do, but didn't eventually end up managing to do all too much damage with. Love the aggression, though. Trying to send those across the map makes a whole lot of sense. We're going for T2 mexes here to try and continue upgrading the economy. I think it's a great idea. We do also have some fusion reactors coming up and online. Typically, you don't get the sort of spirally economies that you do with the advanced fusion reactors and the like. However, with this much metal, no reason you couldn't go for multiple different economic expansions all at the same time. Not that it's gonna matter on the southern side. Lost Deadman being beset upon by a whole bunch of these T1 destroyers, just good old-fashioned T1 Navy en masse. Now running directly into the main base here of the Blue Commander. The pressure is on, and the Yellow Commander doesn't look like they're gonna put their foot on the brake anytime soon. Mexes are crumbling, and the labs have already fallen. Those destroyers are still looking extremely healthy. And every second they spend over these metal extractors, they're launching depth charges down to try and blow them up. The damage is mounting here, and Lost Deadman finds himself in a tricky situation. Gonna have to rebuild here from scratch. Not the end of the world, because there are so many constructors building tidal generators in the back. You can pull these and build a whole bunch of build power, get back into this game extremely quickly, but it definitely hurts to lose that much of your economy, even if that much economy was over 300 metal per second. You can see the metal bars for the blue team are very full right now. I think mostly that's because we're still producing T1 and the cheaper options of the T1 here. No reason not to go for the absolute most expensive pieces of equipment that you possibly can. Rush up to those capital ships, rush up to those destroyers, rush up to just about everything that you can get your grubby, greedy little hands on. Try and put it all out on the field, because at the end of the day, that's exactly what your opponent is going to go for. Easy to lose track of exactly how much metal per second you have, but for reference here, this would be a sizable, I mean, this would be a proper T3 late game economy, 363 metal per second. The real issue here is actually the energy production. Building energy production at this point is going to be really difficult, because you have to figure out, do you go for fusion reactors or do you just go for mass tidal generators? I think ideally both would be the right answer here. Remember, there are essentially no limitations on metal to be spent, so both is definitely a viable option, yeah. It's a nice little composition up here. We've got destroyers, we've got frigates, we've got battleships, we've got just about everything in the book right here, sweeping across this force right now from Volshok Death calls out the Red Commander, and I think that's exactly the right call out here. Yeah, that was an excellent, excellent engagement right here. Definitely a very efficient trade for the Seafoam Green Commander going up against the Orange Commander. Those depth charges are continuing to be brutal to those submarines. We have a couple of Buccaneers here as well, which are going to be even better for dealing with those depth dwellers. A couple of gunships sneaking their way up north here, but we do have a whole bunch of fighters that were pulled. Good to see. Yep, fighters will be pulled to address all this, and I think that'll be shut down quite nicely. Purple Commander's labs, which were shut down eventually, did get rebuilt here, and so we're sending units forward, but eventually we are transitioning into T2 right here. Yeah, you can see Vanaja not playing around. Vanaja, well known as one of the best pirates on the high seas, going for a full composition of destroyers right now. Not messing around with frigates, not messing around with anything else. A couple of missile ships here for the Vision, but other than that, the sturdiest composition is the highest metal composition. You can see the Yellow Commander actually managing to spend all this metal impressively. A difficult thing to do. But I wouldn't mind seeing a T2 transition. I really feel like going up to those T2 might be well worth it. At the very least for the economy. I mean, you can see the metal extractors are tremendous right here for the yellow player, funding all of this. But this is a great showcase of exactly how powerful those T2 boats are. Here you can see those Seafoam Green T2 boats pushing forward right now. Those despots, man, they pack a punch. They're twin-headed Cerberus cannons. Sorry, tri-headed Cerberus cannons. Quite good at reaching out and hitting hard. There is a capital ship out here eventually, though. The Black Hydra. Here to push back the forces in Seafoam Green. What's the name of that commander? Citrine. That being said, the capital ship is sturdy. Those destroyers put out a crazy high DPS. I think the capital ship lives here, but I don't think it's going to walk away unscathed. certainly taking some heavy hits from that death ball that the Citrine commander has managed to put together. What a metal mess over here. My goodness. The size of this navy is absolutely bonkers. The amount of destroyers we have fighting each other right here is just wild. I love how photogenic this game is. Look at that parade push of destroyers floating across the map over here as we watch this battle up in the foreground. Just beautiful. Tons of fighters up in the air too. Love to see that we did get ourselves into gear as far as the air production goes. Trying to make sure that no more of those air shenanigans come across the map. Certainly would have been a little bit of a disappointing way to lose this game. Yeah, losing vis-a-vis the torpedo gunships flying across. Those monsoons, not necessarily the, oh, pardon me, camera controls, going wild on me. The monsoon, not necessarily the pinnacle of high-tech engineering. Quite depressingly bad, actually, all things considered. A couple of Predators out here, the fast assault submarines from the T2 Cortex Laboratory, shipyard. Actually, it looks like there's not very many. It's just that they're mixed in with Orcas here, so it's a T1, T2 mixed composition. Good to see either way. Mixing in those submarines can be really powerful, and especially those long-range ones, the Krakens, there they are. Those Kraken long-range battle submarines can be extremely difficult to deal with, and especially once you build them up in mass. You can sort of think of them like sharpshooters. They kind of function the same way. One big burst of damage, but then they go on cooldown for a good long while. But it means that if you have, oh, I don't know, 20 of them, 30 of them, 40 of them, 50 of them, it can start to become ridiculous. There we go. We do have a T2 lab starting to produce some submarines here for Venaja, so that's good to see. Continuing to improve the economy as always, so making sure that there's a way to spend the metal as well as the metal itself. Venaja going up against 3 different commanders, and I would say probably well holding his own. Just goes to show the power of a very well-trained naval commander. My goodness, what a match. Absolute carnage right here for these purple boats. Striking down one big clump of units, but only to be replaced by an even bigger clump of units. Absolutely terrifying. Surprised at this point we aren't going for a whole lot more gunships. We do have a bunch of gunships for the red commander, but it doesn't look like we have a whole bunch here for the blue. Surprised we don't see a whole lot of those being built right now and sent forward to try and annihilate all this. There's a lot of missile ships, but if you just keep sending gunships in, eventually you'll do something. Buccaneers here, not really a damage source. They're definitely good against the underwater units, and I think that's definitely their area of expertise. It's why they're included in this composition, but you can see their lasers are, yeah, not menacing as the destroyers are on the front lines here. The Despot battleships are going to be quite a bit better. Predators continue to stream in. The capital ships are building en masse. This is dangerous. I love that we have an anti-nuke despite no buildable area for nukes. It's pretty funny. The capital ship, it's a good habit. It's funny because it's a good habit. In virtually any other game, this would be exactly the right idea here. Just funny that it doesn't actually matter in this one. Yeah. There's those torpedo gunships, keeping the seas clear of these torpedo-spewing orcas here on the seafloor. Good to see. Kind of a band-aid on a major wound situation, though. Like, these are gonna clean up the submarines, but it's not a very efficient way of dealing with them. I mean, it is an efficient way of dealing with them, but they're still gaining a little bit of ground here. And I can't help but wonder if those gunships would be better spent cleaning up other things on the map. Although I guess I'm catching myself still thinking like this is a normal match. You can afford to send gunships there, and you can afford to send gunships just about everywhere else as well. Why not produce twice as many, 4 times as many, 8 times as many gunships, if you can? The death ball was broken through. I think Venaja's transition to T2 was a little too slow and not committed enough. We really stuck around in the T1 tech a little bit longer than I think we should have. And here we go. The Purple Forces continuing to push back over here. We have res submarines reclaiming as if that's necessary. Tons and tons and tons of purple boats marching forward or sailing forward, trying to do as much damage as possible. The build power here should definitely be the premier target. There goes some of it. Northern side is held, but the southern side is crumbling quickly. The mass Despot mixed in with the Buccaneer here is a very brutal composition. Huge DPS from the despots, as well as the depth charge underwater clearing capabilities of the Buccaneer, keeping your despots safe from submarine harassment, which really is one of the only ways to strongly counter a despot, aside from, well, maybe just as many despots as you can field. But I think things are starting to look grim here for the red team. Fighters are pulled right here to shoot down some of these torpedo gunships. In fact, they're going to catch a whole lot of these torpedo gunships. That's an excellent, excellent catch right there. Taking those gunships out of the sky opens up those submarines once more to continue pushing forward. This is all despot over here, so this is also very vulnerable to submarine harassment. As you can see, the green commander, the lime green commander, Sad Panda, deciding to go into mass submarine here. Spending it all on underwater assault forces. I think it's well worth it. You need a good mix of units right here, but it definitely feels like the blue team is pushing way too hard for the red team to handle on the southern side. We're gonna need a crazy reinforcement wave. And I just don't think the red players have the units on the field. Yeah, those submarines continuing to push into all those despots. Such a good trade for them. Every time you see submarines going up against despots, it's a pretty good option, pretty good trade for the submarine player. Loads of build power over here. If we could snipe that, that would definitely be key. Come on, Trilos. I believe in you. We just have to snipe the build power and this entire thing peters out. There we go. We do finally, at the end of the day, manage to snipe the build power right there. The labs go down, as well as a whole bunch of the energy infrastructure back here. The southern side is crumbling and the northern side is building up for a crazy bombing run. We have tons and tons and tons and tons of bombers building up on the northern side. These are the dam busters too. An extremely lethal sort of bomber. My iPad doesn't like this map. Are you really playing on an iPad? That's impressive. I heard somebody was playing on a Nintendo Switch, or at the very least somebody had managed to figure out how to play on a Nintendo Switch. I imagine that thing has got to have its fans roaring full speed, especially in a match like this. The economies of the red team have crumbled. Despite a hardy push from Vanaja, fighting 3 versus 1 for just about that entire match right there. Eventually, the forces were too much to bear as the economy skyrocket upwards. The blue team now leading by about 6,000 metal per second. The bombers coming in to secure the win right now. T2 airships trying to shoot them down and doing a pretty good job of it, but the red team knows it is inevitable. What a hilarious match between these extremely high-level players, showing us some ridiculously non-technical skill, just going straight up the eco ladder into that full and proper late game. When's the last time you saw a late game this ridiculous in under 40 minutes? It's been a while for me, especially on maps unlike this one. Sure hope you enjoyed it. If you like seeing these full metal maps, I know they're a bit chaotic, but I always like to ask. If you enjoy seeing these full metal maps, let me know down below in the comments section, and I will be more than happy to cast a few more of these, especially if I can find some more high-level matches played with some high-level people. But other than that, though, I hope you have a great rest of your day. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the very next video, Beyond All Reason. Peace out, everybody.